Foreign, I've had a long career in multiple industries. If you list my sins, I sound like the worst person on earth. But if you put those against the things I've done right, it makes much more sense. The value of beauty and inspiration is very much underrated, no question. But I want to be clear. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. That is not the point. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. For me, it's simply this. This is something that is important to get done, and we should just keep doing it or die trying. I don't need a source of strength, so quitting is not even, in my nature. I don't care about optimism or pessimism. We're gonna get it done. Tesla was under the most relentless short seller attack in the history of the stock market. Tesla was the most shorted stock in the history of stock markets. This was affecting our ability to hire people. It was affecting our ability to sell cars. It was terrible. They wanted Tesla to die so badly they could taste it. Well, most of them have paid the price. Yes. Where are they now? Work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in 80 to 100-hour weeks every week. All those things improve the odds of success. When people ask me, what can you do to encourage entrepreneurs to start companies? I'm like, if you need encouragement, don't start a company. We basically messed up almost every aspect of the Model 3 production line. From cells to packs to motors, the body line, the paint shop, final assembly, everything. Everything was messed up. I lived in the Fremont and Nevada factories for 3 years fixing that production line, running around like a maniac through every part of that factory. I lived with the team. I slept on the floor so that the team, who was going through a hard time, could see me on the floor. They knew I was not in some ivory tower. Whatever pain they experienced, I had it more. I mean, there wasn't any other way to make it work. Those 3 years, 2017, 2018, and 2019, were 3 years of hell, the longest period of excruciating pain in my life. There wasn't any other way. We barely made it, and we were on the ragged edge of bankruptcy the entire time. Do you feel that this challenge of figuring out the new way of manufacturing gives you an edge now that you've figured out how to do this? At this point, I think I know more about manufacturing than anyone currently alive on Earth. Applause. I can tell you how every damn part in that car is made. I'm not afraid of dying. I think it will come as a relief. So, you may not be able to see the vision of SpaceX come true in your lifetime? Well, I'd like to live long enough to see that. Being at a net worth of roughly $230 billion and being perceived as the richest person. Do you know John Law? I don't know. John Law used to be the richest person on Earth 300 years ago. He was a poker player, a gambler. He was the biggest art collector on Earth. A lot of superlatives. Wow. In the end, he went bankrupt. It's a pretty far fall. Did you ever think about that possibility, that something could go wrong and you could one day lose everything? I mean, there have been many times where I expected to lose everything. Who starts a car company and a rocket company expecting them to succeed? Certainly not me. I thought they both had less than a 10% chance of success. Whatever. I don't care. So many young people from across the globe look up to you. If you have advice for them, what would it be? I think probably they shouldn't want to be me. It sounds better than it is. Okay. Yeah, it's not as much fun being me as you'd think. It could definitely be worse, for sure. Starting a company is really hard. You have to basically prepare to work constantly, from when you wake up to when you go to sleep. You have to be willing to deal with a lot of difficult and thorny problems. You have to be willing to deal with an enormous amount of stress, and you just got to push yourself super hard. I wouldn't recommend it for most people. Try to be useful. Do things that are useful to your fellow human beings, to the world. It's very hard to be useful. Very hard. Are you contributing more than you consume? To try to have a positive net contribution to society. I think that's the thing to aim for, not to try to be sort of a leader just for the sake of being a leader or whatever. A lot of times, the people you want as leaders are the people who don't want to be leaders. So if you live a useful life, that is a good life, a life worth having lived. I would encourage people to use the mental tools of physics and apply them broadly in life. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, the Boring Company, are philanthropy. If you say philanthropy is love of humanity, they are philanthropy. Tesla is accelerating sustainable energy. This is a love of philanthropy. SpaceX is trying to ensure the long-term survival of humanity as a multi-planet species. This is love of humanity. Neuralink is helping to solve brain injuries and existential risk with AI. Love of humanity. The Boring Company is trying to solve traffic, which helps most people, and that also is a community benefit. I encourage people to read a lot of books. Just basically try to ingest as much information as you can. And try to also develop a good general knowledge so you at least have a rough map of the knowledge landscape. Try to learn a little bit about a lot of things because you might not know what you're really interested in. How would you know what you're really interested in if you don't do at least a peripheral exploration of the knowledge landscape? Talk to people from different walks of life, different industries, professions, skills, and occupations. Just try to learn as much as possible. Man's search for meaning. Isn't the whole thing a search for meaning? Yes. We're spending our lives in that search. Like I said, I would encourage people to read broadly in many different subject areas, and then try to find something where there's an overlap between your talents and your interests. Some people may be good at something. They may have skill at a particular thing, but they don't like doing it. So you want to try to find a thing where there's a good combination of what you're inherently good at and what you like doing. When you had that third failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in? Never. Why not? I don't ever give up. I mean, I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated. Essentially, the longer you do anything, the more mistakes you will make cumulatively. If you sum up those mistakes, it will sound like I'm the worst predictor ever. But, for example, for Tesla vehicle growth, I said, I think we're doing 50. And we've done 80%. Yes, but they don't mention that one. I mean, I'm not sure what my exact track record is on predictions. They're more optimistic than pessimistic, but they're not all optimistic. Some of them are exceeded, probably more are later, but they do come true. It's very rare that they do not come true. I mean, I don't aim to disrupt for the sake of disrupting. It's more like thinking about what set of actions are most likely to lead to a better future. One of the things, obviously, in order for humanity to have a compelling future for civilization, is that we must have a clear path to a sustainable energy future. That's one of the things I think everyone would agree with. I'm not someone who tends to demonize oil and gas, to be clear. This is necessary right now, or civilization could not function. So I do think we actually need, at this time, more oil and gas, not less. But simultaneously, we need to move as fast as we can to a sustainable energy economy. I was living in the factory in Fremont and the one in Nevada for 3 years straight. That was my primary residence. No kidding, literally. Did you keep the couch? I actually slept on a couch at one point, on a tent on the roof. But for a while I was just sleeping under my desk, which was out in the open in the factory. And for an important reason. It was damn uncomfortable sleeping on that floor. And always, when I woke up, I'd smell like metal dust. Yeah, but I stopped using the couch because it was in a little conference room. There was a couch there, but I stopped using it and just slept on the floor under my desk so that, during shift change, the entire team could see me. That's important because, the team, if they think their leader is off somewhere having a good time, drinking Mai Tais on a tropical island, it's demotivating. The thing is that since the team could see me sleeping on the floor during shift change, it made a huge difference. They knew I was there, and that mattered. What kind of characteristics does an entrepreneur need to have to be someone like you? Well, I think certainly you need to be very driven and have a high pain threshold. Elon, you are reported by Forbes and everyone else as now the world's richest person. That's not a sovereign, you know. I think it's fair to say that if somebody is, like, the king or de facto king of a country, they're wealthier than I am, but it's just harder to measure. But what people do? So, $300 billion? I mean, your net worth on any given day is rising or falling by several billion dollars. How insane is that? Yeah, I mean, how do you handle that psychologically? There aren't many people in the world who even have to think about that. I actually don't think about that too much. But the thing that is actually more difficult, and that does make sleeping difficult, is that every good hour, or even minute, of thinking about Tesla and SpaceX has such a big effect on the company. I really try to work as much as possible, to the edge of sanity, basically. Tesla is getting to the point where, probably later this year, every good, high-quality minute of thinking has $1 million impact on Tesla. One of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. You want something to be true, even if it isn't true. And so you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid, and like I said, certainly one that I find myself having problems with. But if you just take that approach of assuming you're always, to some degree, wrong and your goal is to be less wrong, then that helps. A challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? That is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things? You need to be very rigorous in your self-analysis. You guys are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Imagination is the limit. Go out there and create some magic. What does Elon have to say about how he takes risks? I literally just try to use the scientific method, frankly, and consider the importance of the outcome and what one is risking in order to achieve that outcome. But like I said, if the outcome is important enough, even if the probability of success is low, one must, I think, still do it, in my view. Some things are very important for having a good future. If we don't do them, well, we're in big trouble. And so, and then, how much of a risk really is it? Because if we don't take those actions, we won't have a good future. And I think the riskiest thing would be no action. I put a lot of stock in, certainly have a lot of respect for someone who puts in an honest day's work to do useful things, and just generally has, not a zero-sum mindset. Or has more of a grow-the-pie mindset. If you sort of say, when we see people perhaps, including some very smart people, kind of taking an attitude of doing things that seem morally questionable, it's often because they have, at a base, sort of axiomatic level, a zero-sum mindset. And they, without realizing it, don't realize they have a zero-sum mindset, or at least they don't realize it consciously. And so, if you have a zero-sum mindset, then the only way to get ahead is by taking things from others. If the pie is fixed, then the only way to have more pie is to take someone else's pie. But this is false. Obviously the pie has grown dramatically over time, the economic pie. So in reality, you can have more pie. The pie is not fixed. So you really want to make sure you're not operating, without realizing it, from a zero-sum mindset, where the only way to get ahead is to take things from others. Then, that's going to result in you trying to take things from others, which is not good. It's much better to work on adding to the economic pie. So, when I interview somebody, the nature of your question is always the same. I say, tell me the story of your life and the decisions you made along the way, and why you made them. And then, also tell me about some of the most difficult problems you've worked on and how you solved them. And that question, I think, is very important, because the people that really solve the problem, they know exactly how they solved it. They know the little details. And the people who pretended to solve the problem, they can maybe go one level deep, and then they get stuck. Are you happy at the moment? I think there are degrees of love. But certainly, for one to be hopefully happy, I think you have to be happy in work and happy in love. I suppose I'm medium happy. There are degrees of happiness. Can love for projects or work compensate for love among people? I think love of work, in my experience, could at best make one halfway happy. What was your biggest challenge in life? One of the biggest challenges, I think, is making sure you have a corrective feedback loop and then maintaining that corrective feedback loop over time, even when people want to tell you exactly what you want to hear. That's very difficult.